Standing by, standing by. Okay, hang on. I'm like literally almost sitting on my cat. So if you hear it, let me out. Okay, here we go. Okay, and we are live. All right, what is happening, everybody? Saul K here. Man, I'm so excited. Let me just do a quick sound check. Standing by, standing by. Okay, cool. So, welcome, everybody. I'm so excited to be here with Duvid Swirsky, a good friend of mine in LA, live from the studio, the home studio. And Duvid is one of the featured artists in the book, This Gift, which started out as a little pet project, me talking to some friends. And then it turned into this 400-page Goliath of a book, which I just got. So I'm super excited. And I'm really excited to introduce you to my audience because I know not everyone's heard of you. And I have such a wide variety of people that I'm connected with, as you do as well. So welcome. Glad to have you.
Cool to be here with you, Saul. We're proud of you, man, for doing such a cool project. So cool, really. Good work.
Well, thank you. Well, for anyone that doesn't know who you are and like a little bit of a general introduction, why don't you just tell people who you are and a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Duvid, or Duvid, as a lot of people call me. I grew up in Israel. I sort of am mostly probably known for my band MOSHAV, or MOSHAV band. It was a band that all grew up together on a MOSHAV called Modi'in in Israel. And do lots of other things. Maybe some people have, know me from different projects that I do, and just a lot of music. Just thank God, blessed to play all of these things for a living. It's pretty far out.
Cool, I love it. And so now your Moshav was kind of unique in a way because it was connected to Shlomo. And can you just talk about that? Because some people may not even know what a Moshav is and may not be connected to him and his music. So maybe talk about kind of what that was like growing up for you.
Yeah, so Moshav is it's a village. It literally means a place to dwell in or a place to sit in. But in Israel, there's city living and then there's a lot of country living, and it's made up of these small communities. Some are bigger, some are a little smaller. And I'm sure lots of people have heard of the word kibbutz. So it's sort of like a kibbutz, but Moshav, similar to kibbutz, a little bit different. But the one I grew up on is called Moshav Mevo Modin. It was founded by sort of followers and Hasidim of Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach, and a very musical sort of hippies who came from mostly the States, and for one reason or another wanted to live in Israel, and then decided to sort of start this community together, in a very musical community, a lot of art, a lot of things that we sort of think of as like a healthy lifestyle these days, things like granola and tofu,
Kale.
kale. And this was back in the day in Israel. Nobody had heard of any of that stuff, Now it's all very popular in Israel. Israel is one of the leading vegan countries in the world. But at the time, it was like you might as well have been speaking like some foreign language to them. And but it was a very cool place to grow up on.
Cool. And so, you have such a different perspective from everyone else in the book. First, obviously being born in Israel. Second, that if I remember correctly, your parents were musicians. And like for many people in the book, they wanted to grow up to be, I don't know, James Taylor, or they wanted to grow up to be Queen or something. Whereas for you, your parents were really big influences on you. Is that accurate?
Yes. So first of all, I was actually, just to correct you, I was born in the States actually, and my parents moved to Israel when I was a few months old. So that's just the fact. I have to get the facts straight. So I basically was born in Israel, but actually I was born here. And my parents, well, my mother was a musician. My dad wasn't a musician, but he was a huge music lover. And then I would say, probably somewhere around 75, 80% of the parents on the Moshav did play instruments, some more professionally, some less professionally. So music was everywhere. And I hear a lot of people say music chose me. I didn't choose music, but in our case on the Moshav, it kind of literally was that. There were instruments everywhere. Everyone my age, at least, played an instrument, something, again, different levels, but everybody played. And it was one of the things we did as like a pastime. And it was really all sort of melded together. So there was the spiritual side, the shul that was very much the center of the MOSHAV, and it was full of music constantly. I mean, sometimes without instruments, sometimes with instruments, but so it all sort of melded together. The whole thing, music was not something you could sort of single out from anything else that was going on. Judaism, music, health food, all the stuff was sort of happening. And I thought of it as one thing that's just kind of a part of the everyday fabric of everyone's lives.
I love it. There's some African cultures that don't have a word for music because it's just so much a part of everything. It's not a separate thing. So, kind of in that light, at least for me growing up, it was like I wanted to be a professional musician, which there was definitely no other example of that in my family. And so for you, all the people playing on the MOSHAV, were you thinking growing up, this is what I want to do? Or was there a certain point at which you're like, hey, you know what? I want to do this for real, for a living type of thing?
Yeah, I always wanted to do it. I don't know that I thought of it as a living, because another thing on the MOSHAV was everyone, a living
It was
in terms of what we think of wasn't really a big, that was less of a big part of everybody's life. So I don't know that I thought of it as a living, but there are definitely times that stick out. First of all, seeing the parents and Shlomo play live shows, they would bus people, they would bus in youth groups to the MOSHAV as a part of their visit to Israel.
Right.
So they would bus in these kids. So it would be like an afternoon. We would work in the kitchen, like washing dishes, 10, 11 years old. And they would bus in, 5 buses. So 300 kids would descend onto the MOSHAV. They'd get fed and they'd get some stories told, and then they'd get a concert, usually by the parents. The father, they had a band that would play for them. Every once in a while, it would be Shlomo who did it. And we would work in the kitchen, and then we would just sit mesmerized watching the band. So it wasn't even like, oh, I want to do that for a living. It was like, how do I do that? That seems like the greatest thing you could do. So how do I get onto the stage? And then a few years later, I was on the stage.
Okay, so yeah, this is a little vignette of the book that I want you to share. So you said something about you were playing guitar, and Shlomo's band leader or something said, "Hey, we need a bass player. If you could learn bass, you could play." Tell that story a little bit.
Yeah, so I was learning guitar like a lot of us were, and I certainly was not the best guitar player from my group, and I still do music for a living, and some of the guys that were way better than me don't do it anymore. So at the time, I certainly wasn't the greatest one, but I really wanted to be a part of it. And the band leader said, there's a lot of guitar players, but if you learned how to play the bass, you could get a gig. Everyone needs a bass player. So I went out with him and bought a bass in Tel Aviv, cheapest bass I could find because I couldn't afford anything. And he taught me one string, the first string. It's an E string, And he said, these songs are really simple. They all go 1, 4, 5. And he taught me the numbers, which till today, really helped me. He didn't say this goes. He said, you find the center of the song of the key that you're in, and then they all go 1, 4, 5, or maybe they go 1, 5, 4. And he showed me where each thing is, and then I remember running into Shlomo on the MOSHAV and him saying, "Hey, brother, I heard you play the bass." And then next thing I knew, I don't even remember exactly how it was. I was in a van going to a gig. And I'm not sure which one I told you about, but the very first one, as I remember it, was in this a concert, a hall that holds I don't know, 5,000, 6,000 musicians, people, not musicians, a huge place. And it was some kind of festival with all these big Israeli stars. And then we got on and played our set. I think, Shlomo was playing 5 or 6 songs, and I got on with my bass. I was so nervous. I was way in the back. They probably couldn't even hear me. And Shlomo also, you have to understand, he always had a pile of musicians on stage. He would just invite people. There'd always be some guy in the corner, banging on something, it was very far out. So I was one of those, this kid, and and I broke the E string, which is literally impossible to do. I mean, I have basses up on the wall. If I took it now and literally smashed it and pulled it with all my might, I don't think I could break it. But I broke that bass string literally about 3 seconds into the concert. And that was it. I couldn't play anything. And I actually remember, and this happened often, Yehuda, who's my partner in MOSHAV, his dad is an incredible musician.
Okay.
Done a lot of things in his life. And he was, when certain times he would be the MD, sort of the band leader, very unorganized, and he would give you a look, which I learned. If you were not, if you were messing up, he would give you this, it would freeze you in your tracks, and I just remember him looking at me like, oh my God.
How does one even break an E string? I've never even heard of that. Anyone?
Now remember, all you could see, like in big shows, you can only sort of see the first row,
Right?
because you can't see anyone else. And I just remember there was two ladies sitting right in front, and they were laughing. And I'm sure they were not laughing at me, but at the time, I was absolutely sure they were laughing at me. And I was just like, but then at the end, Shlomo came up to me and said, brother, that was incredible. And the band leader paid me probably nothing, but to me, I was like, and you get paid. And that was it. I was hooked.
I love it, man. That is so great. And that definitely dovetails into a story I want you to tell for sure. I didn't hear about the broken string. That's incredible. But it's like the famous joke of the kid that, goes to a bass lesson and then comes back. Well, I learned the E string, and the second one, I learned the A string, third one, I quit. I got a gig. So that was you at like 12 playing for Shlomo, right?
Literally my life story.
Yeah, it was amazing. So, so give people a perspective. I mean, it's so interesting for you. So then, how old were you when you came to the States? I never actually asked you that one.
So, if you want to get into details of it, my parents moved around a bunch until they landed on the MOSHAV when I was about 9 years old.
Okay.
So until then, all like 90% of it in Israel, but we lived on a different MOSHAV up north called Amirim, which is also a really special place. It's a vegetarian sort of holistic MOSHAV. And we came back for third grade. I lived in New York. My grandmother, unfortunately, was ill, so they wanted to be closer to her. So I spent a year in Brooklyn, which was a very wild experience.
Yeah.
And then moved to the MOSHAV. So that's when it was there. And then I moved back, sort of early 20s. I moved to LA with my band MOSHAV, me and Yehuda. We were already touring a lot. So we started touring as teenagers, sort of in the States, when we formed our own band. And then we started to think like, oh, most of our work is here. And as growing up as like kids who had our ear to American music, most of it being, 60s and 70s music, but still, we were more plugged into American music in a certain way than we were to Israeli, at least the Israeli like hits at the time. So we always had a bit of an eye towards the States musically.
Right.
So when we had the opportunity to try it out, we sort of did it, and here we are till today.
Cool. So I love that. And you also have a really unique perspective on the separation or not of Judaism and art, right? Judaism and culture. So like for those of us that grew up here, there was like, we need to do a Jewish thing. Okay, I'm going to put the Jewish title on my art or my music or whatever it is, right? And so for you growing up in Israel, it's way more integrated. So coming here, kind of what was that like for you? And maybe you can just kind of speak to that, getting into this wider pool of musicians who do this Jewish thing, but for you, it wasn't so separate. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Well, in a certain way, it's completely not separate for me. And I think of music, and I think most of us musicians deep down do feel this. It's like when you're plugging in to what you're truly here to do and your creativity and that, that source, whatever you want to call it, God, spirit, whatever you call it. Yeah. You're plugging into something that's more than just the notes and licks. It's something spiritual going on. So to me, same thing with my religion, I guess, even though that's a weird word to me. But when I'm plugged in, I'm plugged in. It doesn't matter if I'm playing the instrument or praying or hiking or, spending some time with my children or whatever it is that plugs you into the source. So I think of my music, that's my mission, to plug into the source and to communicate with other human beings. And those are the two things. And that's the same thing with everything that I do. That's what I'm attempting to do. So really, there is no difference. At the same time, growing up in Israel, there definitely is a separation, less today, actually, I think. But back then, there was a very strict separation musically between religious music, sort of popular music, and even then there was a big separation between what we call Mizrahi music, which is Middle Eastern Jews and that influence. These days, it's sort of all meshed into one, which is beautiful, and there's a lot of great Israeli music. There was then too, but there was a huge separation. So at different times in my life, I've thought about it differently. There was a point where I was like, oh, I really want to be doing something that's really true to my personal self. And so I don't want to I don't want it to feel like it has anything to do with religion, And me, like Israel, I hope I'm growing up. I'm feeling like the more I get to know myself, the more I feel like I can sort of combine everything I do. And again, as long as I'm attempting at least to plug in, I'm on the right track.
I love it. Cool. And you're also one of the few artists that has, has done a lot of work within the Jewish world and the shuls and the festivals and all that scene, but also outside of that, and so kind of talk about, I know you have a group called Distant Cousins, and I think there's a group Nefesh that's more like a, prayer type of ensemble, but talk about that work and, anything you want to say about that.
Yeah. So again, MOSHAV is really sort of my family. That's what I grew up in. We still play, and it's really it sort of feels like the family. Distant Cousins is a couple of friends of mine, Dov Rosenblatt, Ami Kozak, who we started working together. And being here in LA, you definitely meet and see the opportunities of working in sort of Hollywood, I guess, TV, movies. So we started as a trio sort of producing music for some movies, for some shows, and that's grown into, a slightly bigger thing. We compose music, we write music for commercials, kids shows, lots of different things.
Did you guys have a song on The Voice or something like that? Or does it?
We've had a lot of songs on a lot of different things. I think for The Voice, it was probably a trailer or a promo for a new season. We've had, NHL, lots of different things. We work with a company and get sent a lot of different work. And, like every artist, we sort of try to make the most of every opportunity. We've also, through that, created a songwriting workshop called Cousins Create, which really has taken off during COVID, actually. And we do it on Zoom, and it's based on the way we work, where, these companies keep sending us songwriting briefs, and we sort of translated that into something we think anyone can sort of fit themselves into. It's sort of like a mission. In an hour and a half, we've written all these amazing songs with all these different companies and schools and JCCs, and it's really been amazing. And then, like you mentioned, Nefesh is sort of, I think of as my social, spiritual community, where I sort of am like the, musical director, Chazan, I guess. I get to work with incredibly talented musicians and incredibly smart and wonderful people. An amazing Rabbi Susan's there, and it would just feel blessed to be a part of that community.
Cool, I love it. Well, I didn't hear about Cousins Create. Definitely, if you have links and stuff, we'll put that around so people can check that out for sure. And so, I was talking to my wife. Your music, I have to tell you, is actually played in our home. And I'm not just saying this because I'm super critical of music in general. Like, we will listen to it on the way to school with my kids. The Modeh Ani and stuff, and the Shabbat Volume 2 and Shabbat Volume 1. And so it's like part of our family, which is great. And I love that It's not something, oh, I want to listen to something Jewish. Oh, let me find it. It was just like, this is just great music. So, and there's a perception of you, artists are like, God, they're just so talented, got all this stuff going on. You're writing that. You don't make any mistakes. I mean, besides the E string, okay, you don't really make any mistakes, right? This guy. So, I want you to share a story, which was one of my favorite moments of the entire book. I had all the artists share a big mistake, not a little, not, like a gadol, a gazunta mistake they made in their career or on stage or on the bima. And your story was so good. I was like laughing and I had chills the whole time. So if you would please do us the honor of sharing the story. I think you know the one I'm referring to, so people can hear that it's not all sunshine and roses, and sometimes we make mistakes.
It's so funny because I kind of get the chills a little bit when I realize what you're talking about. I'm surprised. Some of this, it's so funny because you're mentioning it, and like I'm like, I told him this story,
Okay.
but feels really good to share. Yeah, so I had just started working a little bit with another great artist, Craig Taubman, who I'm sure we've all learned stuff from, and I think we met with Craig. Right? Is that the way we met? Playing with him?
Quite possibly. I've been Friday Night Live or something, or maybe on a festival. I'm not sure, but it's very possible. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just started working with him. He's a very special person and special artist.
Yeah.
And he's very on the fly. Anyone who's ever worked with him knows that. And I certainly know that now. He makes decisions in the moment, like all best artists do. And I think it was Hanukkah, and it was a concert again. I would say probably like somewhere around 1,000 people, maybe more, maybe a little less. I don't know. It felt like a big full room, and he asked me if I had a song about light, to sing, and I sent him. I listened. I thought through a couple, and I found I remember listening to a Matisiao song about light. I can't even remember it right now, but something about light. And I sent it to him, and I never heard back. So I figured, well, he probably didn't like it, or we're not going to do it, so whatever. And then we get to rehearsal, and he's like, "Oh, your song, you were going to sing it tonight." I was like, "Oh, okay." And I was like, "Well, I hope I have some time after the rehearsal to sort of relearn it or learn it for the first time." And then we did a quick rehearsal where we didn't rehearse this song. And I was kind of happy because I didn't really know it. And then there was a short break, between the rehearsal and the concert. And I sort of went to a corner and sort of tried to remember it, or at least create some version of it that maybe I could do. And I was like, I guess I'll do it alone, or I don't know if I'll have to turn and teach it to the band. And we get to the concert, and I'm plugging in, and Craig turns to me and he's like, "We're going to start with your song." I'm like, "Start with this." Again, now I know Craig, so none of this is surprising. And while I'm doing that, I'm noticing that my guitar it's not working. It's every time I plug it in, it makes a horrific buzz. We've all had that situation. So I was like, "Okay, play it." So I'm just like, I take my plug out and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna like sort of lean into it. So I pick up my guitar and I walk off the stage, down the stairs. And Craig's like, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And I walk into the crowd, and my mind goes blank, like literally blank. And I hear sort of in the distance, I'm like, "No, what's going on?" And I hear an old lady, "Is he gonna do something?" And I hear Craig going, "Do something, do." But my mind's completely blank. And I remember my mind going, "Okay, you can't think of the song, but maybe you can think of a different song to play." But nothing came. And I just had to walk back to the stage and play the rest of the show after that. And not only that, but without a guitar that was working. So I just kind of stood there. But again, and I might have said this before.
Oh my God. Oh.
I have to say that looking back on it today, I'm very grateful, because I feel like those moments when, obviously that's kind of as embarrassing as you can get. And I remember the next day sort of feeling like, well, here I am again. Like, I'm back.
I lived.
You know, and guess in what it and it's really a mantra I use till today, which often helps me calm down before certain things. Is like I'll be back tomorrow. If
Yeah.
it goes great or
Mhm.
if it goes terribly, either way, I'm going to be back here tomorrow again. So really, there's not a ton of difference between it going great and it going terribly. Obviously, I want it to go great, but yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you for sharing. That's so good. I mean, Ilana said you have to have him tell the story. So, so good. I mean, it's like you think of, the worst fears. I remember I'll share something too, just briefly. I was talking to Doug Kotler, who's a pretty well-known, Jewish musician. He's a cantor. He was the musical director of the URJ Biennial for like a decade or so, a long time. Anyway, I was my first URJ Biennial. This is where I met everyone at once. It was in 2011, I believe. And I was sitting with them and we were talking, and I don't know, we just talked about everything in life. And, I don't know, somehow the concept of forgetting lyrics came up. I was like, yeah, sometimes I forget lyrics and I'm not the best, this is why I write my own music because I forget other people's lyrics, right? But we're laughing, we're talking. And then later that night, it was also, believe it or not, a Hanukkah show with Craig. And he had everyone up there. Josh Nelson was up there. Sam Glazer was up there. I don't know if you were up there. I can't remember if you were there or not. But we're going around. We're all singing Mount Sur. And we got to the bridge. And that was my chosen verse. 1,000 people in the audience, nothing. I've sung this song since I was like 4 years old. It was just like, oh, what are the? And so I just go, you guys got it. And fortunately, the audience, they had it, right? But yeah, anyway, so that was just my one little moment. But I appreciate you sharing that. It's great. And you'll be back tomorrow. So this is great. So for any music artists that feel like, that one of the things that is a great theme, you can't break the Torah, you can't break Judaism, and music, you can't break it, so it's okay to make mistakes for sure. So I definitely want, if you have time to play a tune, a couple minutes would be great. And then we'll kind of just wrap up.
All right. Well, this was a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to reading your book. It's such a cool project. Yeah. So we've actually written the song together, but I'm not going to play that one. It's on one of the records you were mentioning.
Oh,
You know
sure.
right? So,
Yes,
great.
shameless plug. It's Elohai, right?
Elohai Neshama, yeah, which I sing all the time at Nefesh, and I always think of you.
Oh, beautiful.
I think we wrote that like on the High Holidays. I think we did High Holidays again with Craig or something like that. And then we were hanging out at my place in between
In between
services
stuff.
or something.
Yeah, yeah.
And
That's
we
great,
wrote
man.
that
We gotta
really
hang out
quickly.
more often, man. We'll write some music.
Yeah, I know. I'd love to write more. I really love that song, and my kids, it's like my kids' favorite song. So it
Oh,
means a
nice.
lot to me. But you know what I'm going to sing today? I'm going to try again. Hopefully, I don't, after all the talk about messing up. Um, I'm actually working on a project that's really near and sort of my soul. My mother is uh, a poet all my whole life. She's written. And the last year, we started writing some songs together. She sends the lyrics, and I work on the music. And I've, pretty much halfway through finishing the project. I think we think we're going to call it Ima,
Oh, sweet.
and it's been a really, really meaningful project. I lost my father this year, and my mother's unfortunately struggling with her health. So these songs are sort of plugging me back into a time when I first started to write. They feel meaningful in a different way. So I'm going to play this song, or try to play this song. It's called "The Crossing."
Cool. I will mute out while you play.
All right. I'm going to add a little reverb because I can. Crossing the river, crossing the sea, coming and going, takes its toll on me. Migrating birds fly away, the ghost of you still roaming through everything I do, everything I do. Afternoon, I lose myself in the light. I'm somewhere else, somewhere else, somewhere else. The heart is like an ancient urn, more beautiful with every burn. Into the night, into the blue, I whisper, I love you. I whisper, I love you. Afternoon, I lose myself in the light. I'm someone else, someone else, someone else.
Oh, beautiful, man. That was beautiful. I love it. I love it.
Thank you.
So, well, David, thank you so much for your time. So that's from the potential forthcoming record, Ema. Maybe
Ema, yeah, we've I don't know if it's a record or an EP. We've got 5 songs in the meantime. Now that I got 5, I'm thinking like I want another 5, but I also want to put it out. So we'll see what happens. But look for Ema.
I love it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your contribution to this gift. Definitely pick it up if you want to hear that full story and so much more. There was so much more wisdom that you had to share on your journey. And definitely look up Duvid wherever he is online. I think his website will be linked in here. So appreciate you, my brother. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep giving your gift. And we will speak to you soon.
Same to you. Love to your family.
Okay, all the best.